Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The Harry Potter fandom is divided into two camps. Some admire the movie adaptations, while others feel the films didn't live up to expectations. The main reason? Cutscenes that could have added more magic and charm, but were left out. Today, I'd like to remind you of some amusing moments from the books that didn't make it into the films. Enjoy the watch. Number book 1, Fred and George throw snowballs at Voldemort. In the movie, Voldemort is hidden under Quirrell's turban, which doesn't make the situation any less dangerous. However, in the book, there's a wonderful scene where Fred and George use magic to make snowballs chase Quirrell and land in his turban, literally pummeling one of the darkest wizards of all time. This scene adds a touch of lightness and humour to an otherwise tense situation. Number 2, Mrs. Weasley is sweater jokes. In the movie The Philosopher's Stone, Harry and Ron receive sweaters from Mrs. Weasley with embroidered initials, which is faithful to the books. However, Fred and George also receive their sweaters, but their initials were slightly changed. Instead of taking it seriously, the twins joke, "Yours doesn't have any letters. I guess she thinks you won't forget your name," they say. Looking at Ron and Harry, these sweaters, these small details and funny lines added atmosphere. Number 3, Dumbledore pretended not to hear Harry. There's a scene in The Goblet of Fire where Harry shares his thoughts about Rita Skeeter after she exposes Hagrid's secret. In the book, Harry calls her a cow, which prompts a funny reaction from Dumbledore. He pretends not to hear and jokingly says he is temporarily gone deaf. This creates a light and playful atmosphere, something that the film lacked. Number 4, Dobby took all of Hermione's hats. Hermione decides to knit hats and leave them for the house elves, thinking this will grant them freedom. However, this doesn't help. It only gives Dobby the opportunity to collect all the hats and wear them on his head. The elves simply weren't interested in freedom, and Hermione, unaware of this, continued doing what she thought was right. Number 5. Molly Weasley forgot about Fred and George. Molly Weasley often showed affection toward the children who achieved certain successes. When Ron became a prefect in the Order of the Phoenix, she proudly says that being a prefect is a family tradition, to which Fred and George exclaim, "What about us, Fred and George, just neighbours?" This reflects her preferences regarding the children, something that wasn't always visible in the films. Number 6. Dumbledore scolded the Dursleys. In The Half-Blood Prince there's a scene where Dumbledore visits the Dursleys not only to take Harry, but also to make an important remark to his relatives. In this scene, Dumbledore uses spells to apply emotional pressure on the Dursleys and directly tells them they were terrible guardians for Harry. This moment is a joy for viewers who dislike the Dursleys and provides a cinematic finale. Number 7. Ginny's jokes about Harry as tattoos. Harry and Ginny's relationship in the films was fairly subdued and didn't evoke much excitement from viewers. However, in the book, Ginny showed that she was the right match for Harry. After they started dating, she joked that when one of Harry's admirers asked if he had a hippogriff tattoo, she said it was a dragon to make him look cooler. These moments add life and sincerity to their relationship, something that was missing in the films. These are just a few moments from the books that could have added special charm to the adaptation. It's a shame many of them were missed, but they still live on in the hearts of the book as fans. Number 8, Archie's pajamas at the Quidditch World Cup. One of the most amusing characters briefly introduced in the books is Archie, the elderly wizard who appears during the Quidditch World Cup in The Goblet of Fire. Unfortunately, the film adaptation downplays the Quidditch World Cup, and with it, the chance to enjoy Archie's quirky moment. Archie refuses to wear Muggle clothes and instead wears a bright red pajama to the event, drawing attention from other wizards. When someone points out that Muggles don't wear such outfits in public, Archie responds nonchalantly, "I bought it in a Muggle shop." Muggles wear them, women too, by the way. This simple yet hilarious line perfectly captures Archie's carefree, unconventional nature. The film missed a great opportunity to bring out this quirky moment, which would have added charm and humour to the scene. Instead of seeing Archie's playful disregard for Muggle fashion norms, viewers lost a chance to enjoy his cheeky wisdom, which would have undoubtedly brought a smile to their faces. Number 9. Percy's mashed potato incident. One of the funniest family moments in the books is when Fred and George Weasley tease their brother Percy about his ridiculous seriousness. In The Goblet of Fire, the twins have a field day making fun of Percy's new position at the Ministry of Magic. They jokingly discuss how Percy practices his important speeches in front of the mirror, congratulating himself on his accomplishments. "I bet he does it every morning." Fred laughs, stands in front of the mirror, and gives himself a big speech. Percy, already irritated by their teasing, loses his temper completely. In a fit of rage, Percy accidentally launches his spoon full of mashed potatoes into the air, where it sticks to the ceiling. The absurdity of the situation is impossible to miss. Percy's face was bright red, the book describes, as he stormed out of the room, his furious departure only making the family laugh harder. The whole scene, full of humour and sibling rivalry, brings a lightness to the dinner table that is quintessentially Weasley. Sadly, this hilarious moment was left out of the films, depriving audiences of the warmth and humour that characterised the Weasley family dynamic. Instead of seeing Percy's mishap and the joy it brought to his family, we are left with a much less humorous portrayal of his character. The scene with the mashed potatoes on the ceiling was one of those perfect little moments that added personality and charm to the Weasley family, showing how their playful teasing was a vital part of their love and closeness. Fans still remember how much this moment brought to the story. Number 10. Hermione attacks Ron with birds. In The Half-Blood Prince, one of the most emotional yet hilarious moments from the book was left out of the film. Hermione, heartbroken over Ron's public affection for Lavender Brown, creates a flock of enchanted birds to attack him. As the birds swoop down on Ron, he panics, flailing around helplessly, while Hermione stands there, seething with jealousy. Harry can hardly keep a straight face watching his friend struggle. Ron was nearly suffocated by the mass of wings and claws, the book says, describing his comical attempts to fight them off. This scene is a perfect mix of emotion and humour. Hermione is furious, and her anger gives her a fearsome, almost uncontrollable edge. It's clear that she's not someone to cross, especially when her feelings are hurt. The sight of Ron desperate and out of his depth, trying to fend off the birds while Hermione stands there with steely determination, adds a layer of irony that fans loved. The birds themselves are a symbol of Hermione's power, but also of her frustration and jealousy, creating a moment that is as funny as it is telling. Unfortunately, the film took a much more somber approach, focusing only on Hermione's tears and sadness. The playful, almost mischievous side of her anger was entirely missing. The magic of the scene, Hermione's cleverness and Ron's helplessness, was replaced with a simple, sorrowful portrayal of Hermione's heartache. By cutting out the birds and the humour, the film lost an opportunity to show Hermione's complexity and the dynamics between her, Ron, and Harry in a much lighter, yet still meaningful way. Number 11, Harry tries to convince McGonagall about Malfoy. In The Half-Blood Prince, there's a hilarious moment that was sadly left out of the film. Harry, desperate to prove that Draco Malfoy is a Death Eater, tries to convince Professor McGonagall of his suspicions. He insists that Malfoy is up to something dangerous, but McGonagall, ever the skeptic, responds with a perfectly timed dose of sarcasm. Potter, I assume you are absolutely certain? Perhaps you have just decided that Malfoy enjoys being dramatic and mysterious, she says. Her sharp wit is unmistakable. McGonagall's response is laced with the sarcasm that fans know and love, but the films didn't fully capture. Her tone is not just about dismissing Harry's theory, but about lightening the tension in the room. While the stakes are incredibly high in the story, McGonagall's humour cuts through the gloom, providing a moment of comic relief. It's not just her skepticism, but the way she handles Harry's insistence with such dry humour that makes the exchange so memorable. The scene highlights McGonagall's brilliance in balancing authority and wit, something that is too often overlooked in the films. She's not one to easily buy into Harry's emotional outbursts, but her dry remarks show how well she understands him. Maybe he just likes to be dramatic and mysterious, she quips, taking a jab at how over-the-top Draco's behaviour has been lately. It's a perfect example of McGonagall's understated comedic timing, which the films failed to capture as fully as it deserves. In the midst of all the seriousness, this short, sharp interaction between Harry and McGonagall provides a much-needed break from the tense atmosphere. The film missed a golden opportunity to showcase McGonagall's sarcastic brilliance and give the audience a lighter moment in the midst of the looming danger. It was a classic piece of her character, full of sharp humour and keen observation, something fans still remember fondly. Number 12. Peeves says goodbye to Umbridge. One of the biggest losses for fans was the complete omission of Peeves the Poltergeist from the films. Known for his mischievous antics and chaotic pranks, Peeves was a constant source of humour throughout the books. He was the embodiment of fun and chaos in Hogwarts, always getting up to trouble. However, one of his most memorable and hilarious moments was completely cut from the movie adaptation of The Order of the Phoenix. After Fred and George Weasley made their dramatic exit from Hogwarts, Peeves took his mischief to new heights. As he accompanied Dolores Umbridge through the hallways, he began throwing chalk at her while chanting, "Oh, you nasty old woman, take my respects." His mockery was relentless and theatrical, much to the delight of the students. The entire school was cheering him on, while the teachers, surprisingly, made no attempt to stop him. Peeves was going mad, throwing chalk and shouting, "You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach, J.K." Rowling writes, showing how this scene captured Peeves's trademark chaos. This scene was an unforgettable moment of rebellion and laughter. The students, who had endured Umbridge's tyrannical rule, finally had a moment of catharsis, and Peeves became their unlikely hero. The whole spectacle was not only hilarious, but also symbolized the defiance that was brewing within the school. Unfortunately, the film left this moment out entirely, missing the opportunity to show just how much joy Peeves brought to the students. The absence of Peeves in the movie left a gaping hole for fans. His character added a special layer of mischief that perfectly complemented the students' struggles. The sheer absurdity of Peeves' antics, especially in such a tense moment, provided the necessary comic relief. This particular scene with Umbridge was a moment that fans would have loved to see on screen, but instead it remains a beloved memory from the pages of the book. Number 13, Ron meets the garden gnomes. In the Chamber of Secrets, the Weasley garden scene was a hilarious missed opportunity in the films. In the book, Harry and Ron find themselves entangled in a chaotic yet funny task, denoming the Weasleys' garden. The gnomes are small, scrappy creatures that refuse to leave the garden unless they are flung through the air. The boys have to grab the little creatures by their legs, spin them around, and toss them over the fence. The action itself is absurd, but it's the little details that make it so memorable. One of the funniest moments comes when a gnome grabs onto Ron's finger, holding on for dear life. The gnome squeals with delight, completely oblivious to the fact that Ron is desperately trying to get rid of it. Ron's frustration grows as the gnome refuses to let go. It was holding on to Ron's finger and squealing, looking completely delighted, J.K. Rowling writes, capturing the absurdity of the moment. Ron's exasperation is palpable as he attempts to pry the creature off. Fred and George, the Weasley twins, stand by watching the spectacle. They explain to Harry that gnomes are stupid creatures, happy to keep returning to the garden despite all efforts to remove them. Gnomes are really thick, they tell Harry. They like it when you throw them. They keep coming back for more. This adds another layer of humour to the scene as the boys calmly continue their task, while Harry and Ron are caught up in the madness of it all. It's one of those little moments that highlights the absurdity of magical life with a mix of frustration and humour. Unfortunately, this entire sequence was cut from the film, leaving behind only a small mention of the gnomes. The movie missed a golden opportunity to show the comical side of everyday magical life. The gnome-tossing scene was a perfect example of how magic in the wizarding world doesn't always lead to grand adventures or dangerous encounters. Sometimes it's just about trying to get rid of a silly little creature causing chaos. Number 14, Lockhart's Valentine's Day Chaos, Gilderoy. Lockhart is undoubtedly one of the most comical and absurd characters in the entire Harry Potter saga. His antics often go beyond the ordinary, and in the Chamber of Secrets he tries to make Valentine's Day an event no one will ever forget. He fills Hogwarts with pink ribbons, heart-shaped decorations, and even hires Cupids to deliver Valentine cards to students. Lockhart's desire to turn the day into a spectacle highlights his egotistical need for attention, but it also sets the stage for one of the most ridiculous moments in the series. One scene stands out in particular. As Harry walks through the corridor, he's suddenly ambushed by a tiny, angry Cupid. The little creature, with a voice far too loud for its size, begins to recite an awkward, overly dramatic poem about Harry, his green eyes and hair as black as a raven. Swing. Harry, mortified, wishes the floor would swallow him up right there and then. As if things weren't bad enough, Draco Malfoy stands off to the side, laughing at Harry's discomfort, thoroughly enjoying the moment. The humour of the situation lies in how out of place it is. Lockhart, ever the showman, wants to make everything grand, but his attempt falls flat. in the most embarrassing way possible. The absurdity of the Cupids and the forced romanticism are a stark contrast to the reality of school life at Hogwarts, where not everyone is interested in such frivolous celebrations. Even the students who don't have romantic feelings find themselves caught up in the chaos, much like Harry. The films, unfortunately, skipped over this amusing, awkward moment, depriving fans of one of the funniest scenes from the book. The charm of Lockhart's over-the-top, self-absorbed antics lies not only in his ability to create chaos, but in the way he unwittingly drags others into it. The scene perfectly captures his character and the comedic tone that runs through much of the Chamber of Secrets. Without it, the films miss out on some much-needed levity. Number 15. Fred and George experiment on first years. Fred and George Weasley were notorious for their mischievous ways. From their early years at Hogwarts, the twin brothers delighted in finding new ways to cause chaos and share their unique brand of humor with the world. They were always the first to come up with new pranks, and one of their favorite pastimes was experimenting on their fellow students, particularly the younger, unsuspecting first years. This particular tradition was something that the films never truly captured, but it was one of the most entertaining and hilarious parts of the books. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Fred and George's antics took a new turn when they began selling magical joke products. One of their more outrageous products was a collection of enchanted candies which had strange and often unpleasant side effects. These candies were designed to induce symptoms like nosebleeds, fever, and vomiting, perfect for any student who wanted to skip a class or two. The twins, of course, never passed up an opportunity to test their latest creations on their fellow students, especially the younger ones who had no idea what they were getting themselves into. One particularly memorable scene involved Fred and George offering their new products to a group of first years who, being naive and eager to fit in, accepted the candies without hesitation. It was one of those classic moments that perfectly captured the essence of the twins' humor, simultaneously charming and outrageous. Fred and George didn't just want to sell their inventions, they wanted to watch the chaos unfold, to see the reactions of their peers as they suffered the effects of their magical mischief. The reactions were priceless. One first year, upon consuming one of the candies, suddenly found himself doubled over in laughter as his nose started bleeding uncontrollably. Others had to rush off to the bathroom, clutching their stomachs in distress after consuming a candy that caused extreme nausea. It was all in the name of fun, of course, but the twins revelled in the mayhem they had caused, much to the horror of Hermione Granger, who watched in dismay. Hermione was, unsurprisingly, appalled by this behavior. As the ever-pragmatic student, she couldn't understand why anyone would find it amusing to make others suffer, even if it was in the name of a joke. Her disgust was palpable as she watched Fred and George hand out their candies, her lips pursed tightly in disapproval. But what made the scene even funnier was the way the twins completely ignored her objections. They didn't take Hermione's reprimand seriously. Instead, they playfully teased her, offering her the chance to become a voluntary test subject for their new concoctions. Of course, Hermione, ever the voice of reason, refused. But the very idea of offering her the opportunity to try one of their experiments was a perfect example of the Weasley twins' charm. They were never malicious, but always ready to push boundaries, to challenge the rules, and see just how far they could go. It was moments like these that made the Weasley twins so endearing. They were not your typical pranksters. They had a certain warmth about them that made their antics feel less like cruelty and more like a form of good-natured mischief. They never intended to truly harm anyone, though of course their jokes sometimes had unintended consequences. But even when someone like Hermione scolded them for their behavior, it was impossible not to appreciate the sheer creativity and inventiveness they brought to their pranks. They weren't just making people laugh, they were constantly thinking outside the box, finding new ways to bring humor into their magical world. It was a reminder that humor, in its purest form, often thrives in the most unexpected places. What made the scene even more amusing was the contrast between Fred and George, his behavior, and that of their fellow students. The first years were eager to try out the candies, even though they had no idea what they were in for. This eagerness only added to the comedy of the situation. Their excitement and innocence were a stark contrast to the knowing smirks of the older students who had come to expect nothing less than mayhem from the Weasley twins. But for the younger ones, it was a rite of passage, an initiation into the world of Hogwarts pranks. It was a moment that marked their entry into a world where not everything was as it seemed, where laughter could be just as dangerous as it was entertaining. Hermione's objections, however, added a layer of depth to the situation. While Fred and George's pranks were undeniably funny, they also served to highlight the differences in how people view magic and humor. Hermione, ever the rule follower, saw the magical world as a place of structure and discipline, where spells and potions should be used for learning and growth. She couldn't understand why Fred and George would squander their talents on creating products that caused discomfort and chaos. But for the twins, magic wasn't just about studying and following the rules. It was about pushing boundaries, breaking free from the constraints of what was considered acceptable. It was about taking risks, trying new things, and seeing where their creativity could take them. Number 16, Snape in Neville's grandmother as clothes in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. One of the most memorable and truly hilarious moments occurs during a lesson on boggarts, when Professor Lupin teaches his class how to face their deepest fears. In the films, this scene is undoubtedly funny, with a version of Severus Snape dressed in a ridiculous outfit. However, the scene in the book takes things to an entirely different level, adding more humor, absurdity, and even a sense of justice for Neville Longbottom, who has long been seen as the class underdog. The film adaptation of this moment, while amusing, simply doesn't capture the magic and fun of the original scene. In the book, when Neville Boggart takes the form of Professor Snape, it's not merely a comical situation where Snape is dressed in a ridiculous outfit. Instead, the Boggart takes a more specific form. Neville sees Snape wearing the clothes of his grandmother, and it's not just any grandmother his attire. It's a full-on, outlandish outfit that includes an enormous hat adorned with a stuffed vulture and a laughable handbag to complete the look. This wasn't just a matter of Snape looking ridiculous. The whole ensemble screamed absurdity, and it was this ludicrous image that sent the students into fits of uncontrollable laughter. The image of the usually intimidating Snape, a character whom students feared and respected, dressed in such a ridiculous get-up, was a striking contrast to his usual severe demeanor, which made it all the more hilarious. In the book, J.K. Rowling captures the humor of the moment with a rich narrative that paints Snape's outfit as truly bizarre and comically over the top. It's not just any old woman's dress. This is an outfit that only a grandmother would wear, complete with a hat that could have been plucked out of a carnival. The boggart's transformation into Snape in such a ludicrous outfit was so over the top that the entire class burst out laughing. Even Harry and Ron, who had their own strong feelings about Snape, were reduced to tears of laughter, a rare moment where they could feel pure joy in his presence rather than fear. This laughter, however, is more than just an emotional release. It marks a pivotal moment in Neville Longbottom's character development. Neville, who had spent so much of his school life being the class clown and the target of mockery, suddenly found himself in the spotlight in a completely different way. For once, Neville was not the object of ridicule, he was the source of the class's laughter, and for him this was nothing short of a triumph. In the book, it's clear that Neville, who had been nervous and unsure of himself up until this point, finally felt like a hero. He was no longer the bumbling student who was often laughed at. He was the one who had, in a roundabout way, gained the power to make others laugh with him. The humour in this scene is not just about the hilarity of Snape's outfit. There's something deeper about the reversal of roles and how Neville comes to terms with his own self-worth. Throughout the series, Neville has often been seen as the awkward, clumsy, and sometimes hopeless student. His constant failure in classes, particularly in potions, made him an easy target for ridicule, or especially from people like Draco Malfoy and, of course, Severus Snape himself. Neville's lack of confidence and his awkwardness are recurring themes in the books, and his failure to live up to the expectations of his family and his peers weighed heavily on him. But in this particular moment, when Neville faced his boggart and saw Snape dressed as his grandmother, something shifted inside him. For the first time, Neville felt proud of himself. He was no longer the nervous, unsure student who was constantly mocked. He had done something unexpected. He had made everyone laugh. The transformation of Neville's boggart into Snape's grandmotherly costume also speaks to Neville's relationship with the professor. Throughout the series, Snape has always been a source of terror and frustration for Neville. Snape's harsh demeanour and apparent disdain for Neville only added to the latter as insecurity. The boggart turning into Snape in an utterly ridiculous outfit reflects Neville's hidden desire to disarm Snape, to take away the professor's power over him. The ridiculousness of Snape in this moment is a form of triumph for Neville, a subtle rebellion against the fear that Snape has instilled in him. It's as if, in that moment, Neville had finally wrested control from the intimidating professor, transforming Snape's threatening presence into something utterly laughable. One of the most brilliant aspects of this scene in the book is how it is tied to Neville's character growth. Up until this point, Neville's arc has been about self-discovery, gaining confidence and proving his worth. In this scene, Neville is able to demonstrate his bravery and his resourcefulness, as he alone could make the boggart turn into something so absurd. The sheer comedic value of the moment is a catharsis not just for Neville, but for the whole class, and it serves as a moment of empowerment for him. In a way, the laughter that fills the room is a way for Neville to finally take his place among his peers, no longer the one who is laughed at, but the one who is capable of making others laugh. Of course, the students' reactions are part of the humour as well. It's not just the sight of Snape dressed in his grandmother clothing that's so funny, but also the reactions of the students. They are utterly unrestrained in their laughter, something that in any other context might have been considered disrespectful or inappropriate, but in this case, it's exactly what the students need. For so long, they had been oppressed by Snape, heavy-handedness, and his ability to instill fear. But seeing Snape in such a ridiculous outfit, something so outside the realm of what they had come to expect from him, was like a breath of fresh air. It broke the tension and gave them permission to feel joy in a situation that normally would have been full of fear. Number 17, Harry's first meeting with Luna Lovegood. One of the most peculiar and endearing characters in the Harry Potter series, is a shining example of how eccentricity can blend with wisdom in a way that is both fascinating and funny. Throughout the saga, Luna's quirks and idiosyncrasies are a constant source of wonder, but one of her most amusing moments is largely overlooked in the films. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Luna and Harry first meet, the book presents a moment so rich in humour and character development that it is impossible not to smile, even if it was left out of the cinematic adaptation. The scene occurs aboard the Hogwarts Express, a setting that often serves as a backdrop for significant first encounters and pivotal character moments. In this instance, Harry and his friends, including Neville Longbottom and Ginny Weasley, are on their way to school when they cross paths with Luna for the first time. Luna, in her usual unconventional manner, is sitting in the compartment reading a magazine, but not just any magazine. She is holding it upside down. The absurdity of the situation immediately captures the essence of Luna's character, her calm demeanor in the face of complete absurdity. She doesn't notice anything strange about her behavior. For her, the world is simply a different place, where such things are to be expected. This alone is enough to make the scene strikingly funny, as it highlights Luna Dedalki's unbothered nature, which contrasts sharply with the other students' more traditional attitudes. Luna's behavior only becomes more amusing as she continues to interact with the group. As she speaks to Harry, she calmly informs him that he is not insane because he, too, can see the Thestrals. The Thestrals, mysterious and somewhat terrifying creatures that only those who have witnessed death can see, have been a key part of the story since Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. However, the awkwardness of the moment lies not in the creatures themselves, but in the matter-of-fact way Luna discusses them. She doesn't try to make her statement sound important or profound. Rather, she speaks as though she is simply confirming a shared truth, something so normal to her that it hardly warrants explanation. This calm certainty about a topic that most people would find unsettling or disturbing adds to the surreal humor of the encounter. What makes this scene even funnier is the contrast between Harry's confusion and Luna's serene composure. Harry, still trying to grasp the full extent of the wizarding world, finds himself caught in a moment of complete bewilderment. He doesn't know how to respond to Luna's blunt statements. Should he laugh? Should he acknowledge the strangeness of it all? But Luna is unfazed. She goes on with her day as though nothing could be more ordinary than talking about magical creatures with a complete stranger. Her sense of calm is contrasted by the chaos around her. As Luna speaks about the Thestrals, Neville is desperately searching for a lost toad, which adds a layer of frantic energy to the otherwise still scene. The juxtaposition of Luna's composed eccentricity against Neville's frantic panic enhances the comedy of the moment, highlighting the absurdity of the world they inhabit. At the same time, Ginny Weasley, ever the pragmatic one, tries to explain Luna's eccentricities to Harry. Ginny, who has had more exposure to Luna's unique way of viewing the world, understands that Luna's behavior is not malicious or strange, but simply a part of who she is. The challenge, however, lies in explaining Luna's oddities to someone who is completely unfamiliar with them. For Harry, this moment is a reminder of how out of place he often feels in the magical world. His journey through Hogwarts is one of learning and discovery, but his lack of understanding of Luna's calmness in such an absurd situation reflects his own internal turmoil. Harry is often caught between trying to fit in and accepting that his world is anything but normal. The comedic nature of this scene is rooted in the subtle dynamics between the characters. While Neville is caught up in his own mission trying to find his escaped toad, and Ginny is trying to maintain some level of normalcy, Harry's attention is drawn to Luna as disorienting behavior. The fact that the first words out of Luna's mouth are so matter-of-factly absurd, an innocent statement about the Thestrals, turns the moment from strange to funny. Luna isn't trying to make a joke. She's simply speaking her truth. And that's what makes her so entertaining. Her honesty is both disarming and humorous, especially when she confidently announces to Harry that he isn't crazy because he can see the Thestrals. It's a line that in any other context might seem serious, but in Luna's hands it becomes something laughably profound. The films, in their attempt to condense the rich world of J.K. Rowling's books into a limited time frame, made the decision to omit this particular scene. While the filmmakers understandably needed to trim certain moments for pacing, the exclusion of this quirky first meeting between Luna and Harry is unfortunate because it encapsulates the core of Luna's character and adds a layer of humor that could have helped deepen her portrayal. Without this moment, Luna's eccentricities in the films appear less natural, as her peculiarities are sometimes explained rather than simply shown. This scene, in contrast, lets Luna's behavior speak for itself. It's a perfect example of how humor in the Harry Potter series often comes from the characters' reactions to the strange and unexplainable elements of their world, rather than from the magical creatures or events themselves. Number 18, Ron's manly gift for Hermione. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, one of the funniest and most endearing moments is an offbeat scene involving Ron Weasley and his somewhat disastrous attempt to give Hermione Granger a Christmas gift. While many memorable moments from the series have made it to the screen, this particular episode was left out, much to the disappointment of fans who enjoy the awkward, humorous side of the characters. The scene is a perfect example of how Ron, like many teenage boys, fumbles when it comes to showing affection, and it's full of the delightful, cringe-worthy humor that defines much of his personality. Ron's gift to Hermione is a small bottle of cologne called Essence of Muggle Courage. It's an odd, seemingly impersonal choice for a present, but Ron's genuine intentions are evident, even if his execution is far from perfect. At this point in the series, Ron has not yet realized the depth of his feelings for Hermione, and this lack of self-awareness is part of what makes the scene so painfully funny. He's still struggling with the complexities of growing up and the emotions that come with it. Ron has no clue how to express his feelings for Hermione, and it shows in the clumsy and somewhat thoughtless way he tries to do something nice for her. The entire situation is made all the more amusing by the context of the gift. Quote 19 is an absurdly funny choice for someone like Hermione, who is known for her intelligence, self-assurance, and the way she often takes charge of situations. The scent is meant to evoke the strength of muggles, but Ron's misunderstanding of what would be an appropriate gift for Hermione shows his immaturity. The gift is symbolic of the miscommunication that often happens between them, especially in their teenage years when feelings are more complicated than they can fully grasp. When Hermione opens the present, her reaction is one of confusion and surprise. She doesn't know how to react to this gift, and her expression says it all. She's certainly not expecting a bottle of cologne from Ron, and her bewilderment adds another layer of comedy to the scene. As for Harry, his reaction is equally priceless. He's trying to maintain composure, but he's clearly struggling to hold back laughter at the sheer awkwardness of the moment. For Harry, this scene is emblematic of how Ron so often stumbles through situations despite his best intentions. The moment is a perfect snapshot of their friendship at this point in the series. Ron is still the loyal, if somewhat clueless, friend who is far more comfortable in action than in emotion. He's a boy who would rather face danger head-on than have to deal with his feelings. His awkwardness around Hermione is something many fans can relate to, especially in their younger years when emotions often come tangled up in confusion and lack of clarity. He wants to show Hermione that he cares, but the gesture ends up being both humorous and cringeworthy, a mix of affection and misunderstanding. The fact that this particular scene wasn't included in the films is a real shame. While the films certainly capture much of the humor and charm of the books, they often gloss over the smaller, more subtle moments that make the characters feel so real. This scene in its awkwardness shows Ron at his most relatable. It captures the essence of growing up, the awkwardness, the uncertainty, the fumbling attempts at doing the right thing, and the way small moments of failure can be both embarrassing and endearing at the same time. For fans who appreciate the quieter, more awkward moments in life, Ron's gift to Hermione is a treasure. The humor lies not in grandiose moments of magic or dramatic battle scenes, but in something as simple as a poorly chosen present. It's in the awkwardness that Harry Potter fans can recognize the true charm of the characters, the way they are all, in their own ways, trying to figure things out, even if it doesn't always go according to plan. The gift, while laughable, is also symbolic of the deepening friendship between Ron and Hermione. It shows that despite the messiness of adolescence, despite Ron's immaturity, he is still thinking about Hermione and trying to do something nice for her. It's a small, humorous gesture, but one that reveals a lot about the characters and their relationships. This is what makes the scene so appealing. It is not about the gift itself, but the thought behind it and the way it represents the complexity of young love and friendship. Ron's awkwardness with Hermione continues to be a defining aspect of their relationship throughout the series. Even as they mature and develop more romantic feelings for each other, there are still moments of this kind of misunderstanding. The gift of essence of Muggle courage may not have been the right choice, but it encapsulates Ron's personality in a way that's both funny and endearing. It highlights his imperfections, his vulnerability, and his efforts to connect with Hermione in a way that feels genuine, even if it's not quite perfect. In contrast, Hermione's reaction to the gift is telling. It's not that she doesn't appreciate the gesture, it's just that she cannot help but find it absurd, which only makes it more humorous. Her reaction shows that unlike Ron, she's always a step ahead in terms of understanding her own feelings and the feelings of others. Hermione's intelligence and emotional maturity are some of her most defining traits, and her ability to navigate complicated situations, especially those involving Ron, is something that fans of the series can admire. Yet, in this moment, even she can help but be caught off guard by the unintentional humour of Ron's attempt to show affection. This gift, while seemingly trivial, is one of those small moments that adds depth to the characters. It's not a big plot point, but these kinds of scenes that make the world of Harry Potter feel so lived in and real. They reflect the everyday awkwardness of growing up and how even the most well-intentioned actions can go hilariously wrong. It's this balance between the magic of the wizarding world and the relatable, often awkward nature of its characters that makes the Harry Potter series so beloved by readers of all ages. The humour in this scene is also a testament to J.K. Rowling's ability to capture the nuances of human behaviour, particularly in the realm of adolescence. Ron's awkwardness, Hermione's quick-wittedness, and Harry's attempts to suppress his laughter are all so authentic to the way young people interact with one another. It is a universal experience, the awkwardness of trying to figure out relationships, both romantic and platonic, and the clumsy steps that lead to greater understanding. Ultimately, the scene with Ron's gift to Hermione in the Goblet of Fire is one of those small, almost throwaway moments that captures the heart of what makes the Harry Potter series so enduring. It is not just the epic battles or the magical creatures that make these books special. It is the human moments, the little misunderstandings, and the humour that comes from those everyday, awkward situations that we all face. Number 19. Colin Creevey's magical photo fail. Colin Creevey was a character in J.K. Rowling's Quote 24 series, who was not just a background figure but a walking embodiment of fanatical admiration. His infatuation with Harry Potter, though, reached a point of endearing, yet often awkward obsession, which the books captured in a way that would have been hard to translate into film. Colin's attempt to make Harry a star of his own poster in Quote 25 is a moment that perfectly highlights his innocent, yet hilariously misguided enthusiasm for the boy who lived. It's a comedic moment, rich in the unintentional humour that marks his character throughout the series. In Quote 26, Colin first appears as a small, energetic first-year student with wide eyes full of awe, particularly when it comes to Harry. From the very first meeting, he is fascinated with Harry, viewing him not only as a peer, but as a larger-than-life celebrity. Colin's obsession takes root during the fateful moments when Harry first steps into the Hogwarts Express, and the younger students seem to see him as a mythic figure. Colin's admiration goes beyond the typical hero worship. It's almost obsessive, constantly following Harry around and taking photographs. This is where the charm of Colin's character becomes apparent. He isn't simply a fan, he's an admirer in the truest sense, constantly trying to preserve the moments he shares with Harry in photographs. Colin's camera becomes his instrument of obsession, and it is through this lens that he becomes an unintentional comic relief. He doesn't just snap a few photos, he takes every opportunity to click away, capturing Harry in the most mundane moments. The story brings to life one of the book's most comical scenes in the way Colin chases Harry around Hogwarts. He photographs Harry at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, and while Harry is doing homework. It's no wonder that Harry, who would have preferred some peace and quiet, is continually baffled by Colin, his behavior. The images Colin takes aren't those of a carefully posed celebrity or a superstar on a red carpet. Instead, they are the mundane, everyday shots of a boy eating, standing, or just existing. Yet, to Colin, these were the most precious moments of all, worthy of immortalization. As the story unfolds, the true comedic brilliance of Colin's obsession with Harry is revealed when he tries to develop one of his photos. He eagerly rushes to reveal the image he captured of Harry, only to be bitterly disappointed. Colin, in his youthful ignorance, had no idea that the camera he was using could not support the magic inherent in the world around him. Harry, in his usual fashion, had already become a larger-than-life figure, both literally and metaphorically. Colin, his world of Muggle photography, confined by the laws of physics, simply couldn't capture the magic of Harry in motion. The scene that follows is one of the most amusingly tragic moments in the book, as Colin attempts to display his precious photo on his wall. He eagerly anticipated seeing the image come to life, watching Harry smile, wink, or wave as he had witnessed in the magical photographs at Hogwarts. But instead, he is met with the disappointment that the image remains frozen, static, devoid of the life he had imagined. This scene may seem small in the grand narrative of the book, yet it is one of those gems that captures the heart of Colin's character. His naive, childlike belief that the world he lives in should align with his desires. What makes this scene so funny isn't just the fact that Colin is disappointed, but the realization that he had placed so much hope in something as simple as a photograph. To him, Harry wasn't just a student, he was a living legend, someone who deserved to be immortalized in a way that was more than a static image on paper. The photo, when it fails to come alive, mirrors the reality that Harry is not the fantasy that Colin had envisioned. Instead of seeing the boy as a perfect, unattainable idol, Colin is reminded of the limitations of his own world, and yet, despite his disappointment, Colin doesn't abandon his idolization of Harry. The humor comes from this absurd collision of magic and mundane reality. The film adaptation of Untold, quote, 49, chose not to include this scene, instead opting to portray Colin as a fleeting background character, almost a shadow of his book counterpart. The film doesn't fully capture the humor of Colin, his attempts to make Harry a star on his own wall, nor does it emphasize the sheer absurdity of his fanaticism. The moment where Colin tries to develop a moving photo, only to be crushed by the realization that it cannot happen, is one of the many moments in the books that highlights the magical world's occasional clash with the mundane, and it's this clash that the films, in their bid for brevity, failed to include. The decision to leave out this scene is curious because it is a pivotal moment in Colin's development as a character. While he remains a devoted follower of Harry, this scene marks his first realization that his idolization cannot be fully realized in the real world. It is a symbolic loss of innocence for Colin, whose magical world of fantasies about Harry Potter was abruptly interrupted by the cold slap of reality. It's a moment that could have been a perfect illustration of the humorous tension between the magic of the wizarding world and the everyday struggles of the characters, but it was left on the cutting room floor in the adaptation process. However, the impact of this scene is far from lost, and even in the absence of this comedic moment on screen, readers of the books were left with a sense of Colin's unrelenting optimism. He continues to photograph Harry, whether Harry likes it or not, and remains one of the series' more lovable, if somewhat annoying, characters. Even without the humorous clash of the magical and the mundane, Colin's persistence and endearing personality live on through his actions, and his love for Harry never truly fades. His failed attempt at photographing Harry in a way that would make him a magical poster child is just one of the small, humorous moments that reflect Colin, as broader innocence and unwavering belief in Harry is greatness. The books are filled with such delightful contrasts between magic and the ordinary, and this one scene embodies that struggle perfectly. Colin Creevey, with his simple Muggle camera, represents the ordinary world trying to understand the extraordinary. He isn't a villain or a hero. He's just a boy with a dream, and his efforts, though misguided, are filled with the charm of youthful exuberance. In a world full of dark magic, dangerous creatures and world-changing battles, it's easy to overlook the beauty of these small, humorous moments. But it is in these moments that the true magic of the wizarding world exists, where the mundane becomes magical, if only for a brief moment. Through this small, comedic misstep, Rowling captures a moment of true innocence, one that might seem trivial in the grand narrative but is essential to the development of characters like Colin. His attempt to turn Harry into a living legend through a photograph that wouldn't move is a story of youthful ambition, disappointment, and unyielding loyalty to a hero. It's these little moments of humor and humanity tucked away between the larger conflicts and battles that make the Harry Potter series so beloved. Number 20, Ron grows tentacles on his face. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, J.K. Rowling gives readers one of the most entertaining and chaotic moments in the series during a seemingly innocent potions lesson with Professor Slughorn. The scene unfolds in a classroom filled with the typical magical unpredictability of Hogwarts, where students are tasked with brewing potions under Slughorn's watchful eye. Ron Weasley, however, is never one to follow instructions too closely, and in this instance his usual clumsiness reaches new heights. The result is nothing short of a magical disaster that leads to one of the most hilariously absurd moments in the entire series, which for reasons unknown was entirely omitted from the films. As the students gather in the dimly lit potions classroom, the tension is palpable. Professor Slughorn, ever the showman, directs his attention to the task at hand, encouraging his students to prepare the correct potion for the lesson. The potion in question is a simple one by the standards of Hogwarts, a relatively harmless concoction that, if brewed correctly, would create a calming effect. For Ron, however, this is no ordinary lesson, and his attention wanes in the typical fashion. As the rest of the class carefully follows their instructions, Ron, perhaps distracted by his own nerves or the overwhelming presence of the esteemed Professor Slughorn, decides to take matters into his own hands. In typical Ron fashion, he fails to double-check the ingredients. The mix-up happens quickly, unnoticed by everyone except Harry, who is standing nearby. The contents of Ron's cauldron bubble furiously, sending out puffs of smoke and bursts of flame. What started as a minor mishap escalates into a full-on explosion. The eruption is loud enough to startle the entire class, sending the students recoiling in shock. Harry, standing a few feet away, doesn't know whether to laugh or help. But one thing is clear, this is no ordinary mistake. The aftermath of the explosion is even more ridiculous than the event itself. Ron, looking more than a little stunned, is left with an unusual and rather comical result. From his forehead and neck, strange appendages have begun to sprout. These aren't just any ordinary growths, they are long, wriggling tentacles that resemble the limbs of an octopus. The sight is as bizarre as it is funny. Ron, in his usual self-deprecating way, doesn't immediately grasp the full extent of his magical misfortune. It's not until Harry's startled glance at his friend's face that he begins to understand the absurdity of the situation. Ron's head is not just covered in bumps or welts, but in full-fledged animated tentacles. For a moment, Harry, ever the loyal friend, finds himself torn. Should he help Ron, or should he laugh at the absurdity of it all? It's a moment that perfectly encapsulates Ron's character, perpetually in over his head, yet somehow always trying his best. His confusion and embarrassment are compounded by the sight of his own face being overtaken by tentacles. The students in the class react with a mixture of disbelief and outright laughter. It's one of those moments in the books where the magic of the wizarding world feels so natural, yet entirely ridiculous at the same time. The world of Harry Potter is filled with serious, high-stakes moments, but it is also one where misfortune can be as ridiculous as it is magical. Even Professor Slughorn, who is known for his ability to maintain a level of professionalism in the classroom, cannot keep his composure. His usual calm demeanor gives way to a burst of laughter which, for a brief moment, humanizes the usually composed professor. It's a rare moment when even the adults in the wizarding world are swept up in the chaos of the classroom. Slughorn, who has seen his fair share of magical mishaps, can't help but laugh at the sight of Ron, his tentacles writhing and twitching uncontrollably. For Harry, it's a moment of rare levity in the midst of the often overwhelming tension of his 6th year at Hogwarts. The world is on the brink of war and dark forces are gathering, but here, in this classroom, Harry is reminded that even in the darkest of times, there is room for laughter. This magical mishap, while embarrassing for Ron, serves as a much-needed break from the otherwise grim circumstances surrounding them. The scene continues to unfold with Ron attempting to deal with the magical mishap. He struggles to control the tentacles, which seem to have a mind of their own. At first, Ron tries to act as if nothing is wrong, but it quickly becomes apparent that the tentacles are not going to disappear anytime soon. His attempts to hide the tentacles under his robes only make the situation worse. The more he tries to cover them up, the more they seem to wriggle free, causing an even greater spectacle. The entire classroom is in fits of laughter, and even Harry can't help but chuckle at the absurdity of the situation. Ron, ever the good sport, tries to laugh along, but it's clear that he's mortified by the attention. He attempts to cover his tentacles with his hands, but they seem to have a life of their own, writhing and flailing about as if they were sentient beings. The magical disaster becomes the talk of the class, and even Professor Slughorn, who has been known to praise his students at every turn, can't hold back his amusement. It's a rare moment when Slughorn, who usually keeps his composure, is reduced to helpless laughter. Despite the chaos, there is a certain charm to the entire situation. It's a reminder of the unpredictable nature of magic and how sometimes even the most well-laid plans can go awry. In the world of Harry Potter, where dark forces lurk around every corner, this scene is a welcome break from the constant tension. It's a moment that allows the characters and the readers to take a deep breath and enjoy the absurdity of life at Hogwarts. Interestingly, this particular scene was left out of the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, much to the disappointment of many fans. The films, while still capturing the essence of the books, often had to condense or eliminate certain moments for the sake of pacing. In this case, the filmmakers decided that Ron's tentacle mishap was too trivial to include in the context of the larger narrative. While the films certainly captured the darker, more serious moments in the story, they often missed out on the lighter, more whimsical aspects that made the book so beloved. Ron's magical accident in potions class is one such example of a scene that perfectly encapsulates the charm of the books but was ultimately left on the cutting room floor in the film adaptation. The absence of this scene in the films highlights one of the key differences between the two mediums. While the books are able to delve deeply into the minutiae of Hogwarts life and showcase the more humorous moments, the films must condense these moments into a more streamlined narrative. Unfortunately, this means that some of the charm and humor of the original books is lost in translation. In the end, the scene with Ron's tentacles is a reminder of what makes the Harry Potter series so special. It's a world where even the most magical of mishaps can become a moment of hilarity, a reminder that even in the most serious of times, laughter is an essential part of life. Ron's embarrassment and Harry's amusement are a perfect reflection of their friendship, and the scene serves as a light-hearted reminder that no matter how dark the world becomes, there will always be room for a bit of humour. Number 21, moaning. Myrtle flirts with Harry in the bath. In the Harry Potter series, one of the most peculiar and yet amusing characters is Moaning Myrtle, the ghost who haunts the girls' bathroom at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Myrtle, as a character, often provides a mix of sadness and absurdity, but one scene from the fourth book, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, stands out as an example of how the book's humour can be lost in translation when adapted to film. This scene, in which Myrtle develops a strange and somewhat comical affection for Harry, demonstrates the way her obsession with him leads to awkwardness, embarrassment, and plenty of laughs. However, while the film adaptation of the scene did make a brief nod to this, it didn't capture the full depth of Myrtle's amusing behaviour, especially the more embarrassing moments that made it so memorable in J.K. Rowling's writing. In the book, Harry first encounters Moaning Myrtle in the bathroom when he's assigned to retrieve the golden egg as part of his task in the Triwizard Tournament. Myrtle, as usual, is sulking in the bathroom, crying her eyes out, but this time she takes an interest in Harry like never before. The scene is set with an unmistakable air of awkwardness. Myrtle, desperate for attention, begins to float around Harry as he attempts to focus on his task. Her ghostly presence seems to make Harry uncomfortable, but instead of backing off, Myrtle grows more animated as she becomes increasingly captivated by him. What makes this scene so entertaining is not only Myrtle's relentless attention, but also the way she flirts with Harry, an awkward, ghostly flirtation that feels completely out of place in the otherwise serious setting of the Triwizard Tournament. As Harry begins to solve the riddle from the golden egg, Myrtle hovers nearby, sighing and gazing at him in what could only be described as a ghostly infatuation. Her eyes follow his every movement, and her sighs seem louder than ever, like an overly dramatic schoolgirl with a massive crush. As she speaks to Harry, she remarks on her own life, particularly her lonely existence. It's clear she's trying to charm him, though in a way that's more awkward and embarrassing than anything else. In her ghostly, disembodied way, Myrtle comes across as both tragic and ridiculous. She longs for the attention of the living, and Harry becomes the unfortunate target of her affections. The scene becomes even more absurd when Myrtle openly hints at the fact that she enjoys spying on the students in the bathroom, especially the ones who, quote, 38 her. This is not just some innocent haunting. Myrtle, it seems, has developed a full-blown obsession with the living. Her behavior is both inappropriate and comically over the top, as she brazenly admits to watching students when they are most vulnerable. She even claims to know a great deal about the students' private lives, revealing her bizarre and invasive curiosity. Harry, of course, is mortified by this and does his best to distance himself from the situation. But Myrtle seems undeterred, continuing her flirtations in her signature melodramatic style. Her infatuation with him is both absurd and sad, as she can quite grasp the boundaries between the living and the dead, nor can she understand that Harry is simply not interested. In this moment, the scene shifts from a mere ghostly encounter to something much more comical. Harry, trying to focus on the task at hand, can't help but get flustered. His embarrassment is palpable as he tries to concentrate, but Myrtle seems to feed off his discomfort, pushing the situation further into awkwardness. As she talks about her past and how she died, Myrtle inadvertently reveals how desperate she is for attention and how much she's willing to cross boundaries to get it. She tells Harry about how she was once a student at Hogwarts, describing her tragic death in a dramatic and overly emotional way, as if it will somehow win him over. Her fascination with Harry is completely disconnected from any sense of reality, and this makes the entire encounter feel almost slapstick in nature. Harry, meanwhile, does everything he can to avoid further conversation with Myrtle, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. The entire scenario becomes a mix of unintentional comedy and real discomfort. In the midst of the strange, ghostly tension, there is a stark contrast between Harry's discomfort and Myrtle's excitement. While Harry struggles to complete his task, Myrtle remains fixated on him, creating an odd sense of unease that would be almost tragic if it weren't so hilariously awkward. The humor comes not only from Myrtle's strange obsession, but also from the complete mismatch between her romantic interests and Harry's outright awkwardness around her. His reaction is almost universal for anyone who's ever been the object of unwanted attention. He simply wants to escape. The book version of this scene amplifies the humorous nature of Myrtle's behavior by showing just how persistent and oblivious she is to the social cues Harry is trying to send. As Myrtle hovers around him, her flirtations grow more forward, and the scene becomes one of the rare moments in the series where Harry is placed in a completely absurd and over-the-top scenario. The fact that Myrtle is a ghost only adds to the bizarre nature of the encounter. The film, in comparison, offers a truncated version of this interaction, cutting away much of the awkwardness and misunderstanding that makes the scene in the book so memorable. While the scene with moaning Myrtle in the Goblet of Fire was adapted into the film, it lost much of the humorous and awkward energy that made it so entertaining in the book. The film's version of Myrtle's flirtations with Harry feels toned down, perhaps to avoid making the scene feel too uncomfortable. However, the book shows just how ridiculous the situation is, and it's this absurdity that creates such a funny dynamic between the characters. In the book, Harry's discomfort is palpable, and Myrtle's relentless attention only increases his embarrassment. Her obsession with him, though clearly not reciprocated, is handled with the same awkwardness and misunderstanding that often defines youthful crushes, making it relatable and comical at the same time. What makes this scene so charming is that despite Myrtle as ghostly status, her emotions are relatable in a way that makes her a somewhat tragic figure. She isn't just a sad, vengeful spirit, she's a ghost who still longs for attention and affection. In a way, this makes her behavior more understandable, even though it comes off as strange and inappropriate. Her obsession with Harry is both a reflection of her loneliness and her inability to move on from her past life. But it's also a moment of levity in an otherwise tense and dramatic book, providing some much-needed comic relief in the midst of the intensity of the Triwizard Tournament. The humour in Myrtle's actions lies in the sheer absurdity of the situation. Harry, a young boy thrown into a magical tournament full of danger and intrigue, is now forced to deal with a ghost who seems to have an unhealthy fixation on him. The fact that Myrtle's advances are so out of place, an almost slapstick contrast to the seriousness of the tournament, makes the scene memorable and funny. It's a testament to J.K. Rowling's skill as a writer that she can inject humour into such an unlikely situation, transforming what could have been a simple ghost encounter into something far more amusing. This scene, filled with Myrtle's comical behaviour, highlights how the books often use humour to balance the darker, more serious moments in the story. The films, though well executed in many areas, sometimes missed out on the subtler comedic moments that made the book so rich. In this case, Myrtle's infatuation with Harry, though fleeting and awkward, remains one of the funnier and more memorable moments in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Number 22, Draco Malfoy turned into a ferret. In the magical world of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, novels are filled with moments of whimsy and unexpected humour that leave a lasting impression. One scene, in particular, stands out as a fan favourite, yet it never fully made its way into the films. The scene occurs in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, during the infamous moment when Draco Malfoy, the perennial bully and antagonist, finds himself in a most unfortunate situation, turned into a ferret. It happens during a chaotic moment in the Hogwarts grounds. The atmosphere is thick with tension as Draco Malfoy, with his usual arrogance, mocks Harry Potter. This is nothing new for Malfoy, as he often enjoys making others uncomfortable, especially Harry. But on this particular occasion, Malfoy's taunting goes too far, and the result is one of the most laugh-out-loud moments in the book series. The instigator is not Harry, but a seemingly unsuspecting character, Professor Grubbly Plank. However, in a twist of fate, it is revealed that the professor is actually Barty Crouch Jr., a dark wizard posing as her. As Malfoy continues to taunt Harry, Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as the professor, decides that the time for subtlety is over. With a simple flick of his wand, the pompous Malfoy is transformed into a white, fluffy ferret. The absurdity of the situation is almost too much to handle. This prank, intended to humiliate Draco in front of his peers, quickly escalates into something far more ridiculous. Malfoy, once a towering figure of self-importance, now flails helplessly on the ground, reduced to the form of a small, bewildered creature. However, what makes the scene even more absurd and truly hilarious is how Draco's transformation is handled. The ferret version of Draco does not simply remain still in shock. No, it's far more chaotic. Malfoy the ferret is tossed up and down in the air by Crouch Jr., further emphasizing just how completely powerless he has become. In a moment of absurdity, Crouch Jr. even proceeds to roll Malfoy down the pants leg of Gregory Goyle, Draco East's loyal companion, causing even more commotion and confusion. As the situation unfolds, the other professors and students around the scene are left utterly bewildered. They can hardly comprehend what they are seeing. In the book, Rowling masterfully captures the absurdity of the situation, making it not just a magical mishap, but a comedic display of dominance and irony. Even the normally composed Professor McGonagall, who is no stranger to magical mischief, is taken aback by the spectacle. It is a truly rare moment where the usually serious and dignified professors of Hogwarts are left scratching their heads, unsure whether to intervene or simply let the ridiculousness unfold. But it is not just the magical transformation that makes this moment so funny. It is the sheer absurdity of Draco Malfoy's predicament. He is no longer the arrogant, proud student who often looks down on others. He is now a helpless, squirming ferret, at the mercy of Barty Crouch Jr. and the unrelenting laughter of his peers. The contrast between his usual self-assured demeanor and his current, helpless state is what makes the scene so striking. It is the ultimate comeuppance for Draco, a character who has spent years tormenting Harry and his friends, suddenly reduced to an object of ridicule. In the books, the moment continues to build on its ridiculousness. After being thrown around and treated like a mere plaything, the ferret version of Draco is finally placed on the ground, where he scurries around in confusion. The scene is described in such a way that readers can almost picture the chaotic nature of the whole event. Draco, with little paws, scrambling in a desperate attempt to regain his dignity. But of course his dignity is long gone, and he is left with nothing but the scorn of his classmates and the frustration of being utterly humiliated. Interestingly, the scene also plays with the idea of power dynamics within the school. Draco, who has often been portrayed as a character who relishes in making others feel small, now finds himself completely powerless. The ferret transformation is not just a punishment for his behavior, it is a vivid representation of how the tables have turned. In this moment, Draco Malfoy is stripped of his status, his superiority, and his confidence. His transformation into a ferret symbolizes the fragility of power and how quickly things can change when someone is at the mercy of forces beyond their control. One of the reasons this scene has remained so beloved by fans is that it represents a rare moment of levity in a series that often deals with serious themes of friendship, sacrifice, and the battle between good and evil. In the middle of all the darkness that surrounds the Triwizard Tournament and the rising threat of Lord Voldemort, this moment of slapstick humor offers a much-needed break. It is a reminder that even in the face of danger and adversity, there is still room for laughter and light-heartedness. But despite its popularity in the book, this scene did not make it into the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. While the films captured much of the essence of the books, there were moments like these that were either shortened or left out altogether. In the movie, the transformation of Draco into a ferret happens in a much more subdued manner, with little fanfare and no real exploration of the absurdity of the situation. The humor and the chaos of the moment are lost in the film. His attempt to streamline the story, fans who had read the books were left disappointed, as the filmmakers missed an opportunity to include one of the most entertaining and light-hearted moments in the series. The absence of this scene in the movie highlights a significant difference between the two mediums. While the books allow for a deeper exploration of character interactions and the comedic elements that arise from magical mishaps, the films often have to condense these moments to fit within the constraints of time. The scene with Draco's transformation could have added a much-needed moment of levity to the film, but instead it is quickly glossed over, leaving fans longing for the full comedic impact that the books delivered. One can only imagine how the scene would have played out on the big screen. With the right mix of timing, visual effects, and character reactions, Draco's ferret transformation could have been a highlight of the film. It would have provided a much-needed break from the tension surrounding the Triwizard Tournament and served as a reminder of the whimsical side of the wizarding world. Unfortunately, we are left to enjoy this moment only in the pages of the book, where it remains one of the most memorable and hilariously absurd events in the entire series. In the end, the transformation of Draco Malfoy into a ferret serves as a testament to the light-hearted moments that can still be found amidst the larger narrative of Harry Potter. It is a perfect example of how Rowling skillfully blends humour with character development, making us laugh while also delivering a subtle yet powerful message about the nature of power and humility. Though the films may have missed the mark in fully capturing this scene, the books will always hold the memory of a moment that brought joy to readers around the world. Number 23. Harry gets a quill stuck to his lips. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Harry is in the midst of an intense and stressful year. The wizarding world is in chaos, the Ministry of Magic is aggressively targeting him, and he finds himself at the center of a battle he didn't ask for. As if the constant threat of danger and his growing responsibilities weren't enough, Harry also has to cope with school life, including a mountain of homework that feels impossible to manage. It's in this environment of mounting pressure and exhaustion that one of the most absurdly human moments of the entire series occurs. It's a small comedic incident, but it's a perfect reflection of Harry's state of mind at the time, his stress, his confusion, and even his humanity. The scene takes place in the Gryffindor common room, where Harry, like many students, is furiously working on his homework. But unlike his classmates, Harry's mind isn't just focused on essays or potion ingredients. His thoughts are consumed with the constant whispers from the Ministry, his recent conflicts with Professor Umbridge, and his overwhelming frustration with his inability to do more to help in the fight against Voldemort. The pressure of trying to balance these thoughts with the everyday tasks of being a student is a heavy burden, one that weighs down on Harry more than anyone realizes. In the middle of one particularly stressful evening, Harry, unable to focus properly on his homework, accidentally drops his quill into the inkwell. He doesn't notice, distracted by the racing thoughts in his head. And so, in a tired, mechanical motion, he grabs the quill, not realizing that it's now stuck to his lips, its nib pressed firmly against his skin. Still not noticing, Harry proceeds to absent-mindedly push the quill into his mouth. At that moment, he's not even aware of what he's doing. It's as though his brain has momentarily short-circuited by the overwhelming strain of the day. Ron and Hermione, sitting beside him, are oblivious at first to the absurdity of what's unfolding. They are focused on their own work as best as they can manage given the constant interruptions of their environment and the looming threat of Umbridge, his rule over Hogwarts. But soon, both of them begin to notice something strange. Harry? His quill is in fact stuck to his lips. At first, they try to make sense of it. They look at him with confusion, unsure if he's aware of what is happening, or if this is just some bizarre new way of doing his homework. As they watch, they realize the truth. Harry has no idea that he's doing anything wrong. He's just continuing with his tasks, completely unaware of the absurdity of the situation. What follows is a rare moment of genuine amusement for Harry and his friends. They watch as Harry, with an entirely serious expression, attempts to pull the quill away from his lips. The harder he tries, the more it sticks. Harry is determined to solve this problem, but the more he pulls, the more ridiculous it becomes. He's so caught up in the frustration of homework and the mental overload of the war that he can see how utterly ridiculous his situation is. For a moment, he's like a character from a slapstick comedy, but with none of the lightness that usually comes with such scenes. Instead, he is completely serious, doing his best to fix the problem, oblivious to the laughter bubbling up from Ron and Hermione. At first, they try to contain their laughter, not wanting to make Harry feel self-conscious, but it's too much. The absurdity of the situation, the seriousness with which Harry is trying to resolve his sticky quill problem, is just too much to bear. And so, the room erupts with laughter, but Harry doesn't join in. Instead, he continues his struggle, his face still locked in a determined frown. He might have been the chosen one, the one destined to defeat Voldemort, but in that moment he is just a boy with a quill stuck to his lips, utterly unable to fix the simplest of problems. This scene, though brief and comedic, is a brilliant moment of levity in the middle of the darkest part of Harry's story. His life is one of constant turmoil, filled with responsibilities far beyond what any normal young person should have to bear. Yet, in this small moment, we see Harry as not a hero, not the savior of the wizarding world, but a regular teenager trying to deal with something as mundane as homework. It is a reminder of the pressure Harry is under and the toll it taking on him. He is struggling with more than just schoolwork. He's struggling with the weight of a world at war. The quill incident, with its ridiculousness, is a way for J.K. Rowling to show us how the weight of the world can sometimes result in the most mundane but utterly human mistakes. The humour in this moment is also significant because of what it reveals about the nature of Harry as friendships. Ron and Hermione, despite the seriousness of the situations they all face, are able to laugh with him, to share in this absurdity. It's a brief respite from the chaos, but it's a reminder of why Harry values their friendship so much. They are there not just to support him in his moments of victory or hardship, but also to help him laugh, to remind him that it's okay to be human. Harry may carry the burden of the prophecy, but in that small moment, he is simply Harry, someone who, like all of us, gets distracted, makes mistakes, and sometimes forgets about the little things. This scene is also notable for what it reveals about Harry's emotional state. He is exhausted, overwhelmed, and at the breaking point. The fact that he doesn't even notice the quill stuck to his lips is a metaphor for how he is feeling, disconnected, not fully present in his own life. His mind is elsewhere, consumed by the stress of the world around him. It's a poignant reminder that despite all the magic and the adventure that surrounds Harry, he is still just a teenager, struggling to keep his head above water in a world that seems determined to drown him. The moment is made even more powerful by its contrast to the rest of the story. Most of the events of Order of the Phoenix are filled with tension and conflict. Harry is battling Umbridge, his oppressive regime, trying to form Dumbledore's army and dealing with the loss of Cedric Diggory and the looming threat of Voldemort. Yet, in this small, almost insignificant moment, there is humor and humanity. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there are moments of lightness, of normalcy, that make us who we are. Harry's quill incident is a brief escape from the weight of the world, a moment where he is just a regular teenager, surrounded by friends who care for him, laughing at something absurd. This scene was so simple, yet so telling, that it stands out as one of the many small moments in the books that reveal the heart of the Harry Potter series. It's not just about epic battles or dark prophecies. It's about growing up, making mistakes, and finding humor in the most unexpected places. The fact that this scene was left out of the movie adaptation only adds to its charm in the book. It's a small, human moment that might not fit into the movie's grander narrative, but it is one of the moments that makes the book so rich with emotion and depth. It's a reminder that even in the midst of war, even the heroes need a moment to laugh at the simple, absurd things that life throws their way. Number 24, feeding Norbert mandarins. In J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, a curious subplot unfolds involving Hagrid as secret care of a dragon named Norbert. This scene, which was notably shortened in the film adaptation, contains one of the most absurdly humorous moments in the entire series. A moment that embodies the delightful clash of Hagrid, lovable naivety, and the dangerous reality of the creatures he so fervently adores. The scene in question happens when Hagrid, quite absurdly, tries to feed his pet dragon mandarins from a bottle, something that is both tender and utterly ridiculous. This particular event not only shows Hagrid as misplaced sense of parenting, but it also sets the stage for one of the more surreal elements of his character, the way in which he insists on treating dangerous creatures with a gentleness that borders on the absurd. Hagrid, being half-giant, had the unique ability to see the beauty in creatures that most others considered monstrous, but, as most readers know, his affectionate care was often at odds with the ferocity of the animals he loved. He raised Norbert, the Norwegian ridgeback, in secret in his hut, a creature that, even as a baby, was capable of burning everything in sight with its fiery breath. Despite this, Hagrid was convinced that Norbert was merely a small cuddly thing and treated him as if he were a baby. The scene where Hagrid attempts to feed the dragon mandarins from a bottle is where the humor peaks. It's one of those moments where the juxtaposition of the creature's destructive potential and Hagrid's gentle treatment creates a surreal and ridiculous situation. The comedy of this moment is grounded in the stark difference between Hagrid's perception of Norbert and the dragon's actual nature. Hagrid, ever the soft-hearted soul, sees only a harmless baby, a pet that needs care and attention. But the reality of feeding a creature that will one day grow into a fire-breathing beast capable of bringing down entire buildings clashes hilariously with the methodical tenderness with which Hagrid attempts to nurture his pet. In the book, it is noted how Norbert tries to bite Hagrid, his claws scraping at the table, and his attempts to burn the food, yet Hagrid simply reassures him, You've just got to be firm, Norbert. The absurdity is, in Hagrid, utter belief that his comforting approach will work, despite the obvious danger. As Hagrid works to feed Norbert, the scene becomes increasingly chaotic. Norbert, sensing the food, growls and thrashes in his cage. His small body, covered in thick, spiky scales, seems incapable of fitting in the role Hagrid had assigned to him as a tiny, helpless pet. The idea of feeding a dragon anything from a bottle is, of course, ridiculous. The size of the bottle compared to the dragon, his large, hungry mouth, is laughable, and it's clear that Hagrid is struggling to manage the situation. The absurdity of it all is heightened by the fact that Hagrid remains convinced that he is doing nothing wrong, even when the dragon's fiery breath begins to singe his beloved hut. The comedy lies in the sheer mismatch between Hagrid's intentions and the dragon's uncontrollable instincts. The humour is further heightened by the involvement of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who, upon discovering that Hagrid had been hiding the dragon in his hut, find themselves in the unenviable position of helping to feed Norbert. They are roped into the care of the dragon, and despite their initial hesitation, end up participating in the feeding process. They assist Hagrid almost as if they were helping him care for an oversized, mischievous pet, and the ridiculousness of the situation is clear to them too. Hermione, in particular, is perplexed by the idea of feeding such a dangerous creature in such a gentle, naive manner. As they struggle to keep the dragon under control, the absurdity becomes even more apparent. There is something inherently funny about the idea of these young students, who are used to dealing with magical creatures in class, now tasked with handling an actual dragon in a cramped and rather ill-suited environment. But what makes this scene so memorable isn't just the absurdity of trying to feed a dragon like a baby. It is the lovable, misguided trust Hagrid places in his own knowledge. Hagrid's character is often defined by his inability to see the potential danger in his beloved creatures, and this scene is perhaps the pinnacle of this trait. The moments when he tenderly holds the bottle for Norbert, murmuring gentle words of encouragement, are imbued with a sense of vulnerability, which contrasts sharply with the dragon's fiery nature. For the reader, it is an endearing moment, not just because of the absurdity, but because it highlights Hagrid's fundamental goodness, even if his methods are questionable. Rowling's choice to leave this moment out of the films is curious, as it is one of those moments that highlights the whimsical absurdity of the wizarding world. While the films often focused on the more action-packed elements of the story, the books are filled with moments of strange, magical humour that are just as important to the atmosphere of the wizarding world. Hagrid's attempt to treat Norbert like a harmless infant adds a layer of gentle absurdity to the plot. It's a subtle but essential part of his character, showing that while he is one of the most kind-hearted and well-meaning people in the series, his lack of common sense around magical creatures often leads to comical and sometimes dangerous consequences. The absurdity of the scene is compounded by the atmosphere in which it takes place. Hagrid's hut, a place filled with strange and often dangerous magical creatures, is the setting for the care of a creature that is far beyond anything Hagrid had ever handled. The small, dimly lit room, cluttered with magical items and the occasional wayward beast, serves as the perfect backdrop for a dragon being fed mandarins from a bottle. This setting, combined with Hagrid's earnest attempts to nurture the dragon, creates a scene that feels both surreal and oddly heartwarming. It's a brief moment of slapstick humour in a series that is otherwise filled with more serious conflicts and magical mysteries. Hagrid's belief in Norbert, his harmlessness, is perhaps the most hilarious aspect of the scene. The idea that a creature that will grow into a massive dragon capable of laying waste to anything in its path could ever be considered a small, cuddly thing is comedic on its own. But the fact that Hagrid insists on treating the dragon as such, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, makes the scene even more delightful. It speaks to Hagrid's deep love for creatures that to others might be terrifying and uncontrollable. His actions are the essence of blind optimism, and it is this characteristic that makes him one of the most endearing figures in the Harry Potter series. While the film adaptations often focus on grander, more visual moments of the story, Rowling's books are filled with these smaller, absurd moments that give the wizarding world its rich texture. The scene where Hagrid attempts to feed Norbert mandarins from a bottle is one such moment. It's humorous not just because of the physical comedy involved, but also because it encapsulates the charming innocence of Hagrid's character. The fact that this scene wasn't included in the film adaptation is a shame, as it's a small yet significant piece of the Harry Potter magic, a reminder that sometimes the most comical moments come from the most unexpected places. For those who have read the books, this moment serves as a reminder of how strange and wonderfully absurd the magical world can be. It's a light-hearted moment in the midst of the growing tension in the story, and it's moments like these that make the Harry Potter series so memorable. Despite the increasingly dire circumstances Harry and his friends find themselves in, there's always room for moments of humour, like a dragon being fed mandarins from a bottle. In the world of Harry Potter, even the most dangerous creatures can be treated with an unshakable belief in their innocence, and that is what makes this scene so iconic. Number 25. Harry tries to do homework at Sirius S. Place. Harry Potter sat in the dimly lit room at number 12, Grimmauld Place, struggling to focus on the essay he had been assigned for Hogwarts. The house, which was the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, had become both a haven and a constant reminder of the chaos that war had brought to their lives. While the room should have been a place of quiet study, it was anything but. Harry, already tired from his long days of training and worrying about the growing darkness outside, found himself fighting a losing battle against distractions. He sat at a rickety desk, quill in hand, the parchment before him stark white and completely empty. Every few seconds his concentration was shattered. The loud flapping of Buckbeak's wings echoed through the house as the hippogriff, ever restless, soared around the room in an agitated loop. His sharp talons scraped against the walls, sending a shower of dust into the air. The creature, squawks and shrieks, made it impossible to focus. Harry glanced over at Buckbeak in frustration, but the hippogriff was oblivious, clearly caught up in its own world. In the corner of the room, Creature, the house elf, was muttering curses under his breath. The elf had never warmed to Harry or his friends, and now, in the solitude of Grimmauld Place, he seemed even more irritable. His mutterings grew louder, almost rhythmic in their repetition, as if he was hoping to provoke someone or perhaps wishing for something more sinister to happen. Harry could barely make out the words, but they did nothing to soothe his already frazzled nerves. But it wasn't just the noise and unrest that kept Harry from his work. No, the true source of his distraction was none other than Sirius Black. Sirius, whom Harry had grown so close to over the past year, was a whirlwind of energy in the house. Despite the ongoing war and the dangers looming around them, Sirius managed to behave like a child, playful, curious, and, above all, endlessly talkative. He could not sit still for long without some comment or question directed at Harry, who, for once, just wanted to concentrate. "Do you think Snape will ever leave you alone?" Sirius would ask, his voice carrying from across the room. It wasn't just one question either. Every few minutes, another one would follow. "What do you think he's really up to? Have you ever wondered if he's working for the Dark Lord? You know, the way he looks at you." Harry had barely managed to get his quill moving when the incessant interruptions began. He would try to focus on the words of his essay, some tedious task about the properties of a magical plant, but each attempt was futile. Sirius's voice was like a buzzing mosquito in his ear. There was no escape from the constant bombardment of questions, each more absurd than the last. Sirius would pace back and forth, seemingly oblivious to Harry's growing irritation. His hands were always in motion, gesticulating wildly as he spoke, his hair tousled and face alight with the energy of someone who had not yet learned the art of stillness. For someone so deeply entrenched in the resistance against Voldemort, Sirius's behavior was a strange mix of joy and recklessness. It was as though he had managed to hold on to the remnants of his youth despite the years of suffering and imprisonment he had endured. As Harry tried once more to focus, the screech of Buckbeak echoed through the house again, followed by the unmistakable sound of Creature's mutterings. Sirius suddenly appeared at his side, looking over Harry's shoulder as if the essay was the most fascinating thing in the world. "Still working on that, I told you. You can take a break. It's not like anyone's going to care about your homework when the Dark Lord is trying to take over the world," Sirius said, his tone light but with a hint of mischief. Harry felt his frustration building. He looked at Sirius, his patience wearing thin. "I can keep putting it off," Harry muttered, trying to maintain his composure. "I've got to finish it." But Sirius wasn't listening. Instead, he launched into another series of questions, each one louder than the last. "Do you think Dumbledore's really got a plan? I mean, do you ever wonder if we are all just waiting for something that's never going to happen? What's the point of it all, really?" The more Sirius spoke, the more Harry's mind began to wander. His frustration gave way to a strange sense of helplessness, as if the noise, the interruptions, and the endless questions were too much for him to handle. The room, once a space of quiet reflection, now felt oppressive. The walls seemed to close in on him as he struggled to complete the assignment. It wasn't just the distractions. It was the sense of being trapped in a never-ending loop of questions, doubts, and interruptions. Harry looked down at the parchment again, but the words refused to make sense. His quill hovered over the paper, unmoving. A few more seconds passed before he let out an exasperated sigh, finally putting down his quill. It was impossible to concentrate with all the chaos around him. Sirius continued to prattle on, unaware of the effect his words were having on Harry's focus. In that moment, Harry realized that it wasn't just the noise that was causing his frustration. It was the constant questioning, the need for answers to things he had no control over. Sirius's questions were not just about Snape or the war. They were about everything Harry had been grappling with in his own mind. The burden of trying to understand the world around him, the people he trusted, and the choices he had to make had become overwhelming. Every question seemed to carry more weight than the last, pressing down on Harry. his already fragile state of mind. The chaos in the room was a reflection of the chaos in Harry's life. The constant battle between his duties as a student, a member of the Order, and a friend was taking its toll. It wasn't just the homework, it was everything. The endless war, the fear, the uncertainty, it was all too much. Despite the mounting pressure, there was a certain absurdity to the situation. Harry couldn't help but see the humor in it all. Here he was, in a battle for his life, and yet he couldn't even get through a simple essay without being interrupted by an over-enthusiastic godfather, an irritable house elf, and a hyperactive hippogriff. It was as if the universe had decided to throw every distraction his way just to make his life even more complicated. And yet even in the midst of his frustration, there was something comforting about it all. The chaos in Grimmauld Place was a reminder that life, even in times of war, still had moments of laughter and levity. Serious antics, though maddening, were a form of escape from the heavier burdens that weighed on Harry's shoulders. Despite everything, despite the noise, the chaos, and the war, Harry knew that he was not alone. In this strange, imperfect place, surrounded by his friends and allies, there was still room for humour, for questions, for the moments of lightness that reminded him of what they were fighting for. The scene, as chaotic as it was, brought a sense of normalcy to Harry. Life. It reminded him that even in the darkest times, the bonds between friends and family could still offer moments of joy. The scene, though absent from the films, was a perfect reflection of the everyday struggles and absurdities that Harry faced in the fight against the Dark Lord. Despite the noise and the distractions, Harry knew that he was not alone. Number 26, the Hermione Army, joke. The Harry Potter books are filled with moments that leave readers both enchanted and amused, but there are scenes that are often left out in the film adaptations, much to the disappointment of fans. One such scene comes from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, where a playful yet significant moment between Hermione, Harry, and Ron is portrayed. It is a scene that encapsulates the heart of their friendship, full of humour, teasing, and a bit of light-hearted sarcasm. This moment centres around what would have been called Hermione's army, an idea that foreshadows the formation of Dumbledore's army later in the series, but is much more innocent and humorous in its origins. At the beginning of Goblet of Fire, before the full gravity of the magical world as impending dangers sets in, the trio, Hermione, Ron and Harry, are going through their 4th year at Hogwarts. As the students prepare for the Triwizard Tournament, Hermione takes on an almost teacherly role with her friends, as she often does. It is clear from the start that she is eager to help them prepare for what lies ahead, particularly when it comes to their studies and anything related to the tournament. Hermione, always the one with her nose in a book, starts instructing Harry and Ron on how to study more effectively. Her earnestness and seriousness shine through as she tries to get them to take the whole thing more seriously. In the midst of this, there is a particular moment where Hermione, in her typical fashion, delivers a lecture on their responsibilities as students. She is lecturing Harry and Ron about their performance in school, their lack of attention to detail, and how they are often unprepared for the challenges that come their way. She takes it upon herself to ensure they understand the importance of discipline and knowledge, just as she has always done since they first met on the train to Hogwarts. This drive to push Harry and Ron into academic focus leads to an amusing exchange. As Hermione continues her mini-lecture, Ron, in a burst of sarcasm, mocks her in a playful manner. He jokes that Hermione is certainly going to form her own army, an army of students who follow her orders, studying and preparing for everything with the precision of a military operation. This leads to what has become a fan-favorite line as Ron jokes about the idea of an army of Hermione. He tells her, with a mock-serious tone, that it is only a matter of time before she starts forming her own squadron of followers. He says, quote, 60B. The playful jest encapsulates the dynamic between the three friends: Hermione's bossiness, Ron, cheeky attitude, and Harry, his amused compliance. Even though Ron pretends to be frustrated with Hermione's constant advising, it's clear that he's also fond of the dynamic, finding it both funny and endearing. Hermione, true to her character, pretends to be offended by Ron's mockery. She acts like she is hurt by his suggestion that she would form some sort of serious army, but the truth is that it is all in good fun. She does not take Ron's teasing too seriously. Instead, she smiles, her lips curling up into the smallest of grins, revealing that she knows he's only joking. In that moment, her stern expression softens, showing the warmth and affection that underlies their friendship. She might scold and lecture them, but her actions and words are always driven by care. It's in these moments of light teasing and gentle sarcasm that the real bond between the three is most evident. Their friendship is built on a foundation of mutual respect, love, and the willingness to get through tough situations together, no matter how ridiculous or humorous they might seem at the time. This moment between Hermione, Ron, and Harry is more than just a funny exchange. It reveals the nuances of their friendship, full of teasing, sarcasm, and the kind of gentle ribbing that comes from years of knowing each other intimately. The way they interact shows the ease with which they slip into their respective roles within the trio. Hermione, always the overachiever, is the one who cares deeply about their success. Ron, ever the foil to Hermione's seriousness, provides a sense of levity and humour, often mocking the very things he knows are important, but making it clear he loves Hermione's attention. Harry, the quiet observer, plays the role of the neutral party, often going along with the antics of his friends, finding both amusement and comfort in their familiar routine. What makes this scene even more memorable is the fact that it is entirely absent from the film adaptation of Goblet of Fire. The dynamic between Hermione, Ron, and Harry is one of the key elements that grounds the series in reality. While the films do capture the seriousness and drama of their adventures, moments like these, where the three of them share simple, funny interactions, are left out. In the book, this playful banter sets the tone for the rest of their interactions throughout the story. It is a perfect moment of normalcy amid the chaos of the Triwizard Tournament, where the trio shows their solidarity through humour. The absence of this scene from the films highlights one of the challenges of adapting a beloved book series into movies. Not every moment can make it to the screen, and some of the more subtle, intimate moments between characters often get lost. However, the magic of these books lies not just in the big, dramatic moments, but also in the quieter, everyday exchanges that make the characters feel so real. The Hermione's army joke is one of those moments, a small, funny scene that deepens the portrayal of Hermione's leadership qualities and the bonds between the trio. In the book, this moment foreshadows the much more serious creation of Dumbledore, army in Harry Potter, and the Order of the Phoenix. Hermione's desire to form an army, even if it's just for fun at first, is a precursor to her role in leading the resistance against Umbridge's oppressive regime. The army of Hermione is not just a joke, it is a manifestation of Hermione's strength and determination to stand up for what is right, even when the situation isn't quite so dire. Her personality, which is often seen as bossy and overbearing, is shown here to be rooted in a deep sense of responsibility and care for her friends. The scene also reflects the playful nature of their friendship. While Hermione may have taken the task of educating Harry and Ron seriously, it's clear that their bond is one of affection and shared humour. They don't always agree, but they never stop teasing and supporting each other. This is what makes their friendship so compelling and real, and it's a shame that the films didn't capture this particular moment. The omission of the army of Hermione line may seem like a small detail, but it is a missed opportunity to show just how much of their strength as a trio comes from these simple human interactions. In the grand scheme of the series, this moment is a reminder that the trio's success is not solely dependent on their bravery or their ability to face down dark forces. It is also grounded in their ability to laugh, to joke, and to find comfort in each other's company, even in the midst of great uncertainty. Whether it's the formation of an army or a small, humorous exchange, moments like these remind readers of the power of friendship, the importance of finding humor in the toughest of times, and the enduring bond that holds Harry, Hermione, and Ron together throughout their journey. Number 27, Dumbledore, talks about knitting. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, there is a small but delightful scene that never made it into the films, a moment that encapsulates much of Dumbledore's eccentric and endearing character. It happens when Harry and Dumbledore visit Professor Horace Slughorn's home, a house filled with a peculiar charm. They stand at the door, waiting for Slughorn to answer, when Harry, with his usual polite curiosity, asks if Dumbledore would like to sit down. And Dumbledore, with his characteristic warmth and quirk, simply replies, "No, thank you. I like knitting. It is very soothing." This unexpected line, so simple and offbeat, is one of those moments in J.K. Rowling's books that simultaneously surprises, amuses, and deepens our understanding of Dumbledore's personality. In the films, however, this charming snippet is nowhere to be found. The absence of this line, though seemingly trivial, points to something larger in the way Dumbledore's character was portrayed. Dumbledore, throughout the series, is a man of great wisdom, power, and mystery, but his eccentricities, his light-heartedness, and his ability to find joy in the small and odd things in life often go overlooked in the movies. In the books, Dumbledore is not just a figure of solemnity and authority. He is, at times, a playful, humorous character who enjoys a good laugh, a glass of lemon drops, and in this case, the quiet, repetitive comfort of knitting. His love of knitting is not just a humorous quirk, it highlights his quiet and reflective nature, offering a side of him that is often overshadowed by his larger-than-life role as the headmaster of Hogwarts and his involvement in the fight against the Dark Lord. This line, "I like knitting," it's very soothing, might seem like a throwaway comment, but in the context of the entire series, it's a wonderful example of how Dumbledore's personality is imbued with moments of warmth and lightness. The director of Hogwarts is a man of many talents and many burdens. He is responsible for guiding Harry, overseeing the school, and strategizing against Voldemort, all while holding secrets that he will take to his grave. In this line, however, we glimpse a more human side of Dumbledore, a side not governed by the great weight of destiny or magic, but rather by simple, comforting pleasures. Knitting is, after all, a form of creativity, a way to focus one's mind on the repetitive, calming task of creating something with one's hands. For a man who carries the weight of the world on his shoulders, knitting is the perfect antidote to the intensity of his life. Dumbledore's love of knitting also speaks to his sense of individuality and his preference for finding peace in small personal acts. In a world that constantly demands action and grand gestures, Dumbledore's knitting reflect a deliberate choice to find solace in something simple and grounded. It's a form of self-care, one that the book shows is just as important as the high-stakes decisions he makes as a leader. We see this same sensitivity in Dumbledore when he encourages Harry to think for himself and embrace his emotions, rather than rush toward the bigger, more dramatic choices of life. The fact that he finds peace in the rhythmic and soothing act of knitting speaks volumes about his character. It shows that even the wisest and most powerful people need time for quiet reflection and the chance to indulge in the simple joys of life. One of the main aspects of Dumbledore's character that often gets overshadowed by his more serious responsibilities is his sense of humor. Throughout the books, Dumbledore is known for his dry wit and playful remarks. He delights in puns, riddles, and occasionally using humor to diffuse tense situations. He is also a master of teaching Harry through humor, helping him understand difficult lessons about life, loss, and the complexities of the world. In The Half-Blood Prince, this brief moment about knitting fits perfectly into Dumbledore's broader use of humor as a tool to disarm, to comfort, and to connect with those around him. When Dumbledore makes a remark like this, it's not just about the knitting itself, it's about creating a moment of levity, a moment where the weight of everything that's going on in their lives can be briefly set aside. In the movies, this side of Dumbledore is less present, and the magic of these small, personal moments is often lost. Knitting for Dumbledore is not just a passing fancy or an idle hobby. It's an illustration of his character, a man who is deeply connected to the human experience and the importance of embracing life, lighter moments. The absence of this line in the films is significant because it reflects the film series' tendency to focus more on Dumbledore as a symbol of authority and less on his multifaceted humanity. In the books, however, this line, while brief, is part of the broader tapestry of Dumbledore's personality that Rowling carefully constructed. He is both a powerful wizard and a man who finds joy in the simplest of things, a teacher who imparts wisdom and laughter in equal measure. The decision to omit this moment from the films highlights a broader issue with the film adaptations of the Harry Potter series. While the films certainly capture the grand spectacle of the wizarding world, they often miss the subtle character development that made the books so beloved. Dumbledore's knitting is a small detail, but it serves as a reminder that the heart of the Harry Potter series lies not in the epic battles or magical wonders, but in the relationships between characters, their quiet moments of reflection, and their ability to find joy in the little things, even in the midst of chaos. The absence of Dumbledore's love of knitting also affects how we understand his relationship with Harry. Throughout the series, Dumbledore serves as both a mentor and a father figure to Harry. Their relationship is built on trust, wisdom, and shared experiences, but it is also marked by moments of humor tenderness, and shared moments of lightness. Dumbledore's fondness for knitting is part of this same dynamic. He is not just a wise, powerful mentor, but a person who can share small, joyful moments with Harry. In a way, this line about knitting helps humanize Dumbledore, making him more relatable to Harry and to readers. Is a reminder that even in a world as magical and dangerous as the one they inhabit, it's the small personal things like knitting that can provide moments of peace and comfort. In the broader context of Harry Potter, Dumbledore's love of knitting also speaks to the importance of self-care, especially for those who carry immense responsibilities. Dumbledore, as we learn in later books, is not immune to pain, loss, or fear. He carries the burden of his own mistakes and the immense weight of the fight against Voldemort. Knitting in this sense becomes a metaphor for how we all cope with the stresses and difficulties of life. Just as Dumbledore finds solace in the simple act of knitting, so too do we all need ways to recharge and find peace in our own lives, no matter how great our responsibilities may be. While this moment is small, it is nonetheless powerful in its ability to show a side of Dumbledore that was often overlooked in the films. It is a reminder that the Harry Potter books were not just about magic and adventure, but about the people who lived in that world, about their friendships, their struggles, and their quiet, simple joys. Dumbledore's love of knitting may be a fleeting moment, but it's a perfect encapsulation of the man himself, wise, humorous, and always finding joy in the smallest of pleasures. In the end, it is these little moments, these flashes of humanity, that make the Harry Potter series so enduringly rich and beloved.